Did you know that right now, flowing through your blood, is DNA from a 200,000-year love affair? A secret relationship between our ancestors and an extinct human species? This story will completely change how you see yourself. Imagine if I told you that for the past 200,000 years, your ancestors were secretly having the longest and most complicated relationship in human history. Not with each other, but with an entirely different species of human. I'm talking about a love story that spans continents, survives ice ages, and literally rewrote the human genome. A relationship so intense that it changed what it means to be human forever. Right now, inside your body, you're carrying evidence of this ancient romance. Between 1 and 4% of your DNA comes from lovers who went extinct 40,000 years ago. We call them Neanderthals. But here's what will blow your mind. This wasn't some rare accidental encounter. Scientists just discovered this was a 200,000-year on and off relationship with 3 major dating phases. And during one 7,000-year period, 1 out of every 20 of your ancestors was literally a Neanderthal. How do we know? Because AI and machine learning just decoded humanity's oldest love story hidden in our DNA. In this video, we're diving deep into the most intimate secrets of human evolution, the passion, the heartbreak, the genetic gifts, the medical curses, and the shocking truth about how this prehistoric romance might have saved humanity while destroying the Neanderthals. Buckle up. We're about to explore 200,000 years of prehistoric love, loss, and genetic consequences that are still affecting your health today. But before we can understand this epic romance, we need to meet humanity's ex, the mysterious Neanderthals. Who were they really? How did they live? And why did this fateful encounter between 2 human species become the most important chapter in our DNA history? Chapter 1, Who were the Neanderthals? 5 minutes. Before we get to the steamy stuff, let's meet the other half of this ancient love triangle. Picture this. You're about to be introduced to humanity's most famous ex. But forget everything you think you know about cavemen dragging women by their hair. The Neanderthals were nothing like the brutish stereotypes Hollywood loves to portray. These weren't your typical dumb cavemen grunting around fires. Neanderthals were sophisticated humans who absolutely dominated Europe and Western Asia for over 400,000 years. That's longer than modern humans have even existed as a species. They were the undisputed kings and queens of Ice Age Europe. Physically, they were built like tanks, stocky, incredibly muscular, with barrel chests and limbs designed for power rather than speed. But here's what might surprise you. Their brains were actually larger than ours. That's right, your Neanderthal ancestors were literally big-brained. Every feature of their body screamed Ice Age survival expert. Their wide noses warmed frigid air before it hit their lungs. Their short, compact limbs conserved heat in sub-zero temperatures. Their massive jaw muscles could crack bones that would break your teeth. They were basically the Navy SEALs of the Pleistocene. They hunted massive woolly mammoths, cave bears, and woolly rhinoceros. Imagine coordinating a group hunt to take down a creature the size of a modern elephant, armed with nothing but spears and teamwork. That takes serious intelligence and social cooperation. But here's where it gets emotional. They buried their dead with flowers. Let that sink in. 60,000 years ago, Neanderthal families were placing beautiful wildflowers on the graves of their loved ones. This suggests they understood death, experienced grief, and possibly even believed in some form of afterlife. They cared for disabled family members. We found Neanderthal skeletons with severe injuries that healed completely, meaning someone nursed them back to health over months or years. They had compassion, loyalty, and deep family bonds. Some evidence even suggests they created art, wore jewelry, and decorated their bodies with pigments. And these weren't primitive brutes. These were complex people with rich emotional and cultural lives. But here's the crucial scientific detail. They were technically a different species from us. Homo neanderthalensis versus our Homo sapiens. Think of it like wolves and dogs. Related, definitely. Similar in many ways, absolutely, but evolved separately for hundreds of thousands of years into distinct species. Yet somehow, genetically, we were still compatible enough to, well, you'll see. The story begins around 600,000 years ago when our common ancestor faced a choice. Some populations stayed in Africa and eventually became U.S. modern humans, But another group was more adventurous. They packed up and moved north into Europe and Asia, facing brutal ice age conditions that would have killed most creatures. Those harsh environments became the ultimate evolutionary pressure cooker. Over hundreds of thousands of years, these populations adapted into something new, the Neanderthals. Meanwhile, back in Africa, our ancestors were evolving along their own path, becoming modern humans. For hundreds of thousands of years, we evolved in parallel universes, becoming more and more different. By the time we met again, we had completely different bone structures, different brain shapes, probably different languages, different cultures, different ways of seeing the world. The Neanderthals had become the ultimate Ice Age specialists. We modern humans had become the ultimate generalists, adaptable to any environment. Two different solutions to the challenge of survival. But apparently, we weren't different enough to prevent some very intimate encounters when our paths finally crossed again. So what happened when these two human species, separated by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, suddenly found themselves sharing the same valleys, the same hunting grounds, and apparently the same romantic interests? That's where our story gets really interesting, because it turns out this wasn't just one meeting. This was a complex multi-generational saga with three distinct waves of romance that literally rewrote human history. Ready for chapter 2? We're about to dive into the three epic waves of prehistoric romance that changed everything. Here's where our story gets absolutely mind-blowing. Scientists using AI and machine learning just completely demolished everything we thought we knew about human history. This wasn't some simple fairy tale of modern humans leaving Africa, meeting Neanderthals once, and having a few babies. Oh no. This was a complex, passionate, multi-generational epic spanning 200,000 years with three distinct waves of interbreeding. We're talking about the most complicated on-again, off-again relationship in the history of life on Earth. Think of it like this. Imagine if Romeo and Juliet's families kept meeting, falling in love, breaking up, and reuniting across multiple centuries and continents. That's essentially what happened between our two human species. Thus, Wave 1, the first forbidden romance 200 to 250,000 years ago. Picture this incredible scene, way earlier than anyone ever imagined possible. Some brave early modern humans decide Africa just isn't big enough for their ambitions. Maybe they follow the life-giving Nile River northward, maybe they hug the coastal roots of the Middle East, or maybe they venture into the Arabian Peninsula back when it was still a green, fertile paradise. These weren't the sophisticated, tool-making modern humans we know from later periods. These were the original pioneers, probably small family groups taking absolutely enormous risks to explore completely unknown territories filled with dangers we can't even imagine. And then it happens, the moment that changes everything. First contact between two human species. Imagine that electric moment when they first laid eyes on each other. The modern humans probably seemed impossibly tall and lean to the stocky, powerful Neanderthals. The Neanderthals probably appeared like living gods to the modern humans, perfectly adapted titans who had conquered the harsh northern world. Despite hundreds of thousands of years of separate evolution, despite completely different cultures and possibly different languages, something magical happens. Attraction transcends species barriers. Sparks fly, literally and figuratively. These aren't just chance encounters. Real relationships form, families merge, children are born who represent the first mixing of human species in hundreds of millennia. But here comes the absolutely heartbreaking twist. Every single one of those children, those products of ancient love stories, stayed with the Neanderthal populations. When the Neanderthals eventually went extinct 40,000 years later, these mixed descendants went extinct with them. These passionate love affairs left zero trace in modern human DNA. It's like discovering evidence of the most beautiful romance novel ever written. But all the copies were burned and all the lovers' descendants vanished from history. Wave 2, the second chance at love, 100 to 120,000 years ago. Fast forward tens of thousands of years, and apparently love finds a way again. Another wave of restless modern humans catches wanderlust and leaves Africa. Maybe climate change forced them north, maybe they were chasing migrating herds, or maybe they inherited that same adventurous spirit that drove their predecessors into the unknown. Once again, when modern humans meet Neanderthals, chemistry happens. Boy meets girl across species lines. Hearts don't care about taxonomic classifications. This time, though, something slightly different occurs. While most of the relationships still end tragically, with mixed children staying in Neanderthal populations, some tiny fragments of Neanderthal DNA from this period actually make it into later human populations. It's like a few love letters from this ancient romance somehow survived the fire and made it into our genetic mailbox. No. Wave 3, the Great Romance, 50 to 60,000 years ago. And then comes the relationship that literally rewrote human genetics forever. This is the major exodus from Africa that anthropologists have always known about, but now we understand it wasn't just about humans spreading across the globe. This was about 7,000 years of continuous, intimate, passionate contact between two human species. 7,000 years. Let that sink in. That's longer than all of recorded human history. That's longer than the entire span from ancient Egypt to today. This wasn't a brief fling. This was the ultimate long-term relationship. And here's the statistic that will absolutely blow your mind. During this incredible period, 1 out of every 20 people in your family tree would have been a Neanderthal. 1 in 20. That means if you could somehow attend a family reunion from 50,000 years ago, every fifth person you'd shake hands with would be a completely different human species. This wasn't rare. This wasn't scandalous. This wasn't even unusual. This was just normal life in prehistoric Eurasia. But here's where our love story takes a mysterious and tragic turn. Despite all this contact, despite all these relationships, despite obvious mutual attraction, the success rate for actually producing surviving offspring was devastatingly low. We're talking about only 2% of these encounters actually resulting in children who lived long enough to have children of their own. 2%. Do the brutal math. Successful interbreeding happened maybe once every 23 to 50 years across entire populations. In modern terms, that's like saying in a city of 1 million people, you might get one viable human Neanderthal baby every few decades. So what was going catastrophically wrong? Were there hidden biological incompatibilities that made reproduction nearly impossible? Cultural barriers that prevented successful relationships from forming? Religious taboos? Were the hybrid children somehow cursed with health problems that prevented them from surviving to adulthood? Or was there something even more disturbing happening? Something about the fundamental reproductive biology of these two human species that made successful childbearing incredibly rare, even when love was clearly blooming. The answers to these questions dive deep into some of the most intimate and shocking biological mysteries of human evolution, because scientists have discovered there might have been a very specific, very biological reason why this ancient romance seemed to work in only one direction. Ready for Chapter 3? We're about to uncover one of the most scandalous secrets in human evolution, the gender mystery that determined which prehistoric couples could actually have babies together, and why the answer is more shocking than any soap opera you've ever watched. Here's one of the weirdest discoveries in human evolution, and it reads like a biological thriller that would make any detective novelist jealous. Scientists have uncovered something absolutely bizarre hidden in our DNA that changes everything we thought we knew about prehistoric romance. Picture this. You're a genetic detective examining evidence from the most intimate crime scene in human history. You're looking at the DNA fingerprints left behind by 50,000 years of interspecies romance. And what you find doesn't make sense. We have Neanderthal genes scattered throughout our genome like love letters hidden in our genetic mailbox. But here's the mystery that has scientists scratching their heads. We are missing 2 absolutely crucial pieces of evidence. 2 pieces that should be there if this ancient romance worked both ways. The missing evidence. Scientists discovered we're missing mitochondrial DNA, which comes exclusively from mothers, and most of the Y chromosome, which comes exclusively from fathers. It's like finding the crime scene where all the evidence points to only half the story being told. What does this mean? It suggests something shocking, that only one combination of prehistoric lovers could produce fertile offspring that survived to pass on their genes. Neanderthal males with modern human females. Let me paint you the picture of what scientists think was happening 50,000 years ago. Think about it like mules, those hybrid offspring of horses and donkeys. You can breed a horse and a donkey together and you'll get a mule. The mule will be strong, intelligent, and perfectly healthy, but here's the catch. Male mules are almost always sterile. They can't reproduce, and the genetic line ends with them. Something eerily similar might have been happening during the Ice Age between our two human species, the one-way love story. Picture this scenario playing out in prehistoric Europe. A Neanderthal man meets a modern human woman. Maybe he's strong, perfectly adapted to the harsh Ice Age environment, an expert survivor who knows how to hunt mammoth and survive brutal winters. She finds him attractive, capable, genetically different from the men in her own tribe. They fall in love, they have children together. Those children grow up healthy, strong, carrying the best genetic innovations from both species. Most importantly, both the male and female children can grow up to have children of their own. The genetic line continues. But now, picture the reverse scenario. A modern human man meets a Neanderthal woman. Maybe he's tall, lean, comes from a larger social group with extensive trade networks. She's attracted to his exotic appearance, his different culture, the genetic diversity he represents. They fall in love, they have children together. The children seem healthy at first, but here's where the biological thriller turns tragic. The male children might have been sterile, unable to reproduce. The genetic line ends with them. The heartbreaking implications. This creates a heartbreaking possibility that scientists are still investigating. There might have been thousands of hybrid families across prehistoric Europe where love bloomed, children were born, but only some of those children could continue the family line. Imagine being a Neanderthal woman who fell in love with a modern human man. You have children together. Your daughters grow up to have families of their own, but your sons, despite being healthy and strong, never father children. The family line splits, with only half your genetic legacy surviving into the future. Think about the emotional reality for these prehistoric families. Parents watching some of their children thrive and reproduce while others, through no fault of their own, couldn't continue the genetic line. Communities where certain combinations of relationships worked while others led to reproductive dead ends. The social network advantage, but the mystery gets even more complex when you consider the social dynamics of these prehistoric populations. Recent research suggests that early modern humans lived in significantly larger social groups than Neanderthals. While Neanderthal communities might have consisted of 50 to 100 people, modern human groups could include hundreds or even thousands of individuals connected through trade networks spanning continents. If populations were mixing, and if modern human males had advantages in what scientists delicately call sperm competition, well, that could explain a lot about why Neanderthal genetic contributions became diluted over time. Picture this, you're a young woman in a mixed prehistoric community. You have the choice between partners from small, isolated Neanderthal families or partners from large, well-connected modern human networks. Even if attraction doesn't discriminate, practical considerations might influence long-term relationship choices. Modern human men might have had advantages that had nothing to do with individual attractiveness or compatibility. They might have come from families with better trade connections, more resources, larger support networks. In a harsh Ice Age environment, those advantages could be literally life or death for your future children. The biology versus culture debate. The data suggests this wasn't necessarily about violence, warfare, or cultural dominance in the way we might imagine. This might have been about basic reproductive biology in mixed populations combined with demographic advantages that had nothing to do with hostility. Modern human populations were simply larger, more connected, and possibly more reproductively successful on a purely biological level. When you combine those advantages with one-directional fertility between species, you get a mathematical equation that leads to gradual genetic absorption rather than an extinction through conflict. It's like watching a slow-motion demographic merger where love, attraction, and reproductive biology combine to gradually transform two distinct human species into one hybrid population. The unanswered questions, but this biological thriller is far from solved. Scientists are still investigating why this directional fertility might have existed. Was it something specific about Y chromosome compatibility, mitochondrial DNA function, hormonal differences that affected reproductive success? Some researchers think it might have been related to immune system incompatibilities that affected male fertility more than female fertility. Others suspect it could have been related to differences in reproductive anatomy or physiology that we're only beginning to understand. The truth is, we're dealing with biological mysteries that are 50,000 years old, and some questions might never be fully answered, but what we do know is that this directional reproduction pattern had profound implications for how these ancient love stories played out. And understanding this reproductive asymmetry is crucial for comprehending what happened next in our story. How Neanderthal social structures, family relationships, and community dynamics were shaped by a dating scene that was far more complicated and heartbreaking than anyone ever imagined. Ready for Chapter 4? We're about to dive into the intimate details of Neanderthal social and romantic life, where we'll discover that their approach to love, family, and relationships was far more sophisticated and emotionally complex than Hollywood ever imagined, but also tragically limited by the demographic realities of small, isolated populations living on the edge of genetic survival. So, what was dating like for Neanderthals? Forget everything Hollywood has taught you about grunting cavemen dragging women by their hair. The reality of Neanderthal romance was far more sophisticated, emotional, and heartbreaking than you could possibly imagine. Life wasn't all mammoth hunting and cave painting. Archaeological evidence reveals that Neanderthals had incredibly rich emotional lives and surprisingly complex social structures that would make modern relationship counselors proud. Picture this. 50,000 years ago, Neanderthal families were demonstrating levels of compassion and care that put many modern societies to shame. We've found Neanderthal skeletons showing evidence of severe injuries that healed completely, meaning someone lovingly nursed them back to health over months or even years. Imagine a Neanderthal man who broke his leg hunting woolly rhinoceros. Instead of abandoning him to die, his family carried him back to camp, set his bones, brought him food, kept him warm through brutal Ice Age winters, and cared for him until he could walk again. That's not survival, that's love. They buried their dead with flowers and meaningful objects, suggesting they experienced grief, love, and possibly even believed in some form of afterlife. Picture Neanderthal families gathering wildflowers to place on the graves of their loved ones, showing the same tender emotions we feel at funerals today. But what about romance? How did Neanderthal dating work? They almost certainly had elaborate courtship rituals that would put modern dating apps to shame. Maybe a young Neanderthal man would offer the choicest cuts of mammoth meat to impress a potential partner, proving he was a skilled hunter who could provide for family. Maybe he'd spend weeks crafting the most beautiful, perfectly balanced stone tools as gifts, showing off his intelligence and dedication. Maybe Neanderthal women decorated themselves with ochre and jewelry, creating prehistoric makeup and accessories to enhance their natural beauty. Archaeological evidence shows they used pigments, wore feathers, and crafted intricate ornaments. These weren't just decorations, they were statements of identity and attractiveness. Imagine the prehistoric equivalent of getting dressed up for a date, carefully applying ochre paint in meaningful patterns, arranging bird feathers in your hair, wearing your finest bone jewelry, all to catch the eye of someone special. Genetic evidence from El Cedron in Spain reveals fascinating details about their family structure. DNA analysis shows that they lived in small, incredibly tight-knit family groups where everyone knew everyone else's business, secrets were impossible, and relationships were intensely personal. They practiced patrilocal living, meaning women would leave their birth families to join their partner's group when they got married. Imagine being a young Neanderthal woman, leaving everything and everyone you've ever known to start a new life with your husband's family in unfamiliar territory. That takes incredible courage, trust, and deep emotional bonds. These weren't casual relationships. Marriage meant joining not just a partner, but an entire extended family who would become your new tribe, your new identity, your new world. But here's where the story takes a tragically dark turn that explains so much about their eventual fate. Neanderthal populations were small, isolated, and catastrophically prone to inbreeding. We're not talking about occasional cousin marriages here. We're talking about systematic, repeated inbreeding that created serious genetic problems generation after generation. The math is absolutely brutal. When your entire dating pool consists of maybe 50 to 100 people and half of them are your relatives, romantic options become mathematically impossible. It wasn't a choice. It was demographic catastrophe. Brothers married sisters, uncles married nieces, genetic lines folded back on themselves like origami made of DNA. The Neanderthal gene pool was slowly poisoning itself through lack of genetic diversity. This created communities where genetic disorders accumulated like compound interest. Birth defects became common, fertility rates dropped, children died young, Immune systems weakened. The very survival strategies that had made Neanderthals successful for hundreds of thousands of years were now working against them. Picture the heartbreak. Families watching their children born with disabilities that could have been prevented with genetic diversity. Couples struggling with infertility. Communities where every pregnancy was a genetic lottery with increasingly bad odds. Then modern humans showed up and everything changed. Imagine the culture shock when these two worlds collided. Modern humans traveled in larger social groups, had extensive trade networks spanning continents, and practiced very different mating customs. They brought genetic diversity, new technologies, different ways of thinking about family and relationships. They probably seemed exotic, exciting, and most importantly, genetically fresh to populations that had been marrying their cousins for generations. Did Neanderthal women find modern human men irresistibly attractive because they represented genetic salvation from their inbred communities? Were these tall, lean strangers literally the answer to their reproductive prayers? Did modern human women see Neanderthal men as incredibly strong, capable providers who had survived impossible Ice Age conditions that would have killed anyone else? Were they attracted to the ultimate survival experts? We'll never know the personal stories, the individual moments of attraction, the first conversations between species, but the DNA tells us that somehow, some way, attraction transcended the species barrier in the most profound way possible. Picture the scene, a Neanderthal woman meeting a modern human man for the first time. He's taller, leaner, probably speaks a different language, comes from a completely different culture, but there's something about him that makes her heart race. Maybe it's his exotic appearance. Maybe it's the unconscious biological recognition that his genes could save her children from the genetic problems plaguing her community. Or maybe it's just simple, inexplicable chemistry that transcends species. Or imagine a modern human woman encountering a Neanderthal man. He's incredibly muscular, perfectly adapted to harsh environments, radiating competence and survival skills. He represents genetic innovations that could help her children survive in this brutal northern world. He's the ultimate Ice Age specialist, and attraction to genetic fitness is older than civilization. These weren't just casual encounters or cultural curiosities. These were profound biological exchanges between two human species who had evolved separately for hundreds of thousands of years, but still found each other irresistibly attractive on the most fundamental level. The tragedy is that most of these love stories ended in genetic dead ends due to biological incompatibilities we're only beginning to understand, but the few that succeeded changed human genetics forever, creating a biological legacy that's still affecting your health today. When Neanderthals and modern humans fell in love, they weren't just creating families, they were conducting the most important genetic experiment in human history, exchanging not just genes, but evolutionary innovations, survival strategies, and biological solutions to environmental challenges. Ready for Chapter 5? We're about to dive deep into the genetic gifts and curses that this ancient romance left flowing through your veins, including some absolutely shocking discoveries about how a 50,000-year-old love affair might be affecting your health right now, from your COVID risk to mysterious diseases that doctors are just beginning to understand. Here's where this ancient love story gets medically relevant to your life today. Every single day, the genetic consequences of prehistoric romance are flowing through your bloodstream, affecting everything from your immune system to your susceptibility to modern diseases. Mixing with Neanderthals was like receiving the ultimate mixed bag of evolutionary gifts and curses. Imagine opening a genetic care package from 50,000 years ago, not knowing whether you're getting life-saving medicine or a biological time bomb. The amazing gifts, your Neanderthal superpowers. Let's start with the incredible news. Neanderthal genes didn't just change us, they supercharged us in ways that probably saved our species. First, they gave us immune system upgrades that would make any software engineer jealous. Neanderthals gifted us variants of toll-like receptors, which are essentially your cellular security guards that detect invading pathogens 24/7. Then these molecular sentries patrol your bloodstream, identifying dangerous bacteria, viruses, and other threats before they can establish beachheads in your body. When modern humans moved into new environments full of unfamiliar diseases that had never existed in Africa, these Neanderthal genes were literally lifesavers. Imagine early humans encountering European and Asian pathogens for the first time. Without Neanderthal immune innovations, these diseases could have wiped out entire populations. It's like getting antivirus software that was specifically designed for threats you'd never encountered before. Your Neanderthal ancestors had spent hundreds of thousands of years developing biological defenses against Ice Age pathogens, and they passed that hard-won genetic wisdom directly to you. Neanderthals also gave us genes for thicker skin and hair, perfect insulation for colder climates. If you have particularly thick, coarse hair that seems almost impossible to manage, thank your Neanderthal ancestors. They were giving you biological winter gear encoded in your DNA. Some Neanderthal variants protect against bleeding during pregnancy and prevent miscarriages. That genetic variant that keeps expectant mothers safe during childbirth, that's a 50,000-year-old gift from an extinct human species that's still saving lives today. Other Neanderthal genes influence whether you're a morning person or night owl. Your sleep patterns, your peak energy times, even your circadian rhythms might be shaped by genetic innovations that helped Ice Age humans survive brutal winters when daylight was precious and timing meant the difference between life and death. But then came the biological warfare. But here's where our genetic inheritance gets weird, disturbing, and medically relevant in ways that will shock you. Scientists now think Neanderthals and modern humans didn't just exchange genes during their romantic encounters. They also exchanged sexually transmitted diseases, including ancient versions of herpes and human papillomavirus. Picture this: 50,000 years ago, prehistoric couples weren't just sharing genetic material, they were accidentally conducting biological warfare. Diseases that had evolved in Neanderthal populations for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly jumped to modern human hosts who had no evolutionary defenses. Meanwhile, modern human pathogens were attacking Neanderthal immune systems that had never encountered African diseases. It was an accidental biological arms race conducted in the most intimate way possible. Even worse, some Neanderthal genes that were incredibly helpful 50,000 years ago have become serious medical liabilities in the modern world. These genetic variants were perfect solutions to Ice Age problems, but they're terrible answers to 21st century challenges. The blood clotting gene that once prevented Neanderthals from bleeding to death after mammoth hunting injuries now increases your risk of strokes and deep vein thrombosis in our sedentary modern lifestyle. The genetic variant that helps store fat during times of scarcity now contributes to obesity and type 2 diabetes in our calorie-rich environment. Your Neanderthal medical report card. Let me give you the shocking rundown of how your ancient romantic ancestors might be affecting your health right now. Higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Neanderthal genes affect how your body processes fats and sugars. Genetic variants that helped store energy during Ice Age famines now malfunction in our modern environment of constant food availability. Increased susceptibility to Crohn's disease and lupus. Your supercharged Neanderthal immune system sometimes gets confused and attacks your own body. It's like having military software that's so aggressive it starts shooting friendly targets. The major genetic risk factor for severe COVID-19. Yes, your coronavirus susceptibility might literally come from a 50,000-year-old romance. The same immune system variants that protected against Ice Age pathogens sometimes overreact to modern viruses, creating life-threatening inflammation. There's even a condition called Dupuytren's disease, nicknamed Viking disease, where your fingers permanently curl up into claws. The main genetic risk factors, straight from Neanderthal DNA. It primarily affects people of Northern European descent, suggesting it came from populations with high levels of Neanderthal ancestry. Autoimmune diseases, skin conditions, even depression and addiction susceptibility have been linked to specific Neanderthal genetic variants. It's like your body is still fighting Ice Age battles against enemies that no longer exist. That's the software bug that changed everything. Think of it like this. Your immune system got some amazing upgrades 50,000 years ago, but it's still running on ancient software that sometimes crashes when faced with modern problems. Neanderthal genes were perfectly adapted for Ice Age survival. They help fight off specific pathogens, store energy during famines, clot blood after hunting injuries, and maintain thick insulation during brutal winters. These were brilliant evolutionary solutions to environmental challenges. But evolution doesn't plan ahead. Genes that were life-saving 50,000 years ago can be deadly today. Your Neanderthal inheritance is like carrying a survival kit designed for a world that no longer exists. The shocking truth about genetic burden. Here's the most disturbing discovery of all. Neanderthals had about 40% lower reproductive fitness than modern humans, largely due to accumulated harmful mutations from generations of inbreeding. When we inherited their genes, we inherited some of that genetic burden too. Scientists estimate that people of non-African descent carry approximately 1% lower reproductive fitness due to their Neanderthal heritage. That means the ancient love affairs that gave us immune system superpowers also passed down genetic problems that are still reducing human fertility and health thousands of generations later. It's the ultimate biological irony. The romantic relationships that helped modern humans survive also gave us genetic baggage that we're still carrying today. The medical mystery continues. The most fascinating part? We're still discovering new ways that Neanderthal DNA affects modern health. Every year, scientists find new connections between ancient genes and modern diseases. Your genetic inheritance from prehistoric romance is still revealing medical secrets. Some Neanderthal variants might protect against certain cancers, others might influence your response to medications. Scientists are even investigating whether Neanderthal genes affect pain sensitivity, allergies, and mental health. It's like carrying a medical report written 50,000 years ago that doctors are still learning how to read. Ready for Chapter 6? We're about to dive into one of the darkest chapters of this ancient love story, the inbreeding crisis that nearly destroyed the Neanderthals and explains why their dating pool became a genetic disaster that contributed to their extinction. Here's where this ancient love story gets medically relevant to your life today. Every single day, the genetic consequences of prehistoric romance are flowing through your bloodstream, affecting everything from your immune system to your susceptibility to modern diseases. Mixing with the Neanderthals was like receiving the ultimate mixed bag of evolutionary gifts and curses. Imagine opening a genetic care package from 50,000 years ago, not knowing whether you're getting life-saving medicine or a biological time bomb. The amazing gifts, your Neanderthal superpowers. Let's start with the incredible news. Neanderthal genes didn't just change us, they supercharged us in ways that probably saved our species. First, they gave us immune system upgrades that would make any software engineer jealous. Neanderthals gifted us variants of toll-like receptors, which are essentially your cellular security guards that detect invading pathogens 24/7. And these molecular sentries patrol your bloodstream, identifying dangerous bacteria, viruses, and other threats before they can establish beachheads in your body. When modern humans moved into new environments full of unfamiliar diseases that had never existed in Africa, these Neanderthal genes were literally lifesavers. Imagine early humans encountering European and Asian pathogens for the first time. Without Neanderthal immune innovations, these diseases could have wiped out entire populations. Neanderthals also gave us genes for thicker skin and hair, perfect insulation for colder climates. If you have particularly thick, coarse hair that seems almost impossible to manage, thank your Neanderthal ancestors. They were giving you biological winter gear encoded in your DNA. Some Neanderthal variants protect against bleeding during pregnancy and prevent miscarriages. That genetic variant that keeps expectant mothers safe during childbirth, that's a 50,000-year-old gift from an extinct human species that's still saving lives today. But then came the biological warfare. But here's where our genetic inheritance gets weird, disturbing, and medically relevant in ways that will shock you. Scientists now think Neanderthals and modern humans didn't just exchange genes during their romantic encounters, they also exchanged sexually transmitted diseases, including ancient versions of herpes and human papillomavirus. Picture this: 50,000 years ago, prehistoric couples weren't just sharing genetic material, they were accidentally conducting biological warfare. Diseases that had evolved in Neanderthal populations for hundreds of thousands of years suddenly jumped to modern human hosts who had no evolutionary defenses. Even worse, some Neanderthal genes that were incredibly helpful 50,000 years ago have become serious medical liabilities in the modern world. These genetic variants were perfect solutions to Ice Age problems, but they're terrible answers to 21st century challenges. Your Neanderthal medical report card. Let me give you the shocking rundown of how your ancient romantic ancestors might be affecting your health right now. Higher risk of type 2 diabetes. Neanderthal genes affect how your body processes fats and sugars. Genetic variants that helped store energy during Ice Age famines now malfunction in our modern environment of constant food availability. Increased susceptibility to Crohn's disease and lupus. Your supercharged Neanderthal immune system sometimes gets confused and attacks your own body. It's like having military software that's so aggressive it starts shooting friendly targets. The major genetic risk factor for severe COVID-19. Yes, your coronavirus susceptibility might literally come from a 50,000-year-old romance. The same immune system variants that protected against Ice Age pathogens sometimes overreact to modern viruses, creating life-threatening inflammation. There's even a condition called Dupuytren's disease, nicknamed Viking disease, where your fingers permanently curl up into claws. The main genetic risk factors, straight from Neanderthal DNA. The blood-clotting gene that once prevented Neanderthals from bleeding to death after mammoth hunting injuries now increases your risk of strokes and deep vein thrombosis in our sedentary modern lifestyle. The software bug that changed everything. Think of it like this. Your immune system got some amazing upgrades 50,000 years ago, but it's still running on ancient software that sometimes crashes when faced with modern problems. Neanderthal genes were perfectly adapted for Ice Age survival. They help fight off specific pathogens, store energy during famines, clot blood after hunting injuries, and maintain thick insulation during brutal winters. These were brilliant evolutionary solutions to environmental challenges. But evolution doesn't plan ahead. Genes that were life-saving 50,000 years ago can be deadly today. Your Neanderthal inheritance is like carrying a survival kit designed for a world that no longer exists. The shocking truth about genetic burden. Here's the most disturbing discovery of all. Neanderthals had about 40% lower reproductive fitness than modern humans, largely due to accumulated harmful mutations from generations of inbreeding. When we inherited their genes, we inherited some of that genetic burden too. Scientists estimate that people of non-African descent carry approximately 1% lower reproductive fitness due to their Neanderthal heritage. That means the ancient love affairs that gave us immune system superpowers also passed down genetic problems that are still reducing human fertility and health thousands of generations later. It's the ultimate biological irony. The romantic relationships that helped modern humans survive also gave us genetic baggage that we're still carrying today. The most fascinating part? We're still discovering new ways that Neanderthal DNA affects modern health. Every year, scientists find new connections between ancient genes and modern diseases. Your genetic inheritance from prehistoric romance is still revealing medical secrets. Some Neanderthal variants might protect against certain cancers, others might influence your response to medications. Scientists are even investigating whether Neanderthal genes affect pain sensitivity, allergies, and mental health. It's like carrying a medical report written 50,000 years ago that doctors are still learning how to read. But to understand why Neanderthals passed down so many harmful mutations along with their genetic gifts, we need to explore one of the darkest and most uncomfortable aspects of their society. Their dating scene was a genetic disaster. Ready for Chapter 6? We're about to dive into the inbreeding crisis that nearly destroyed the Neanderthals long before modern humans arrived and discover why their dating pool became so small it was practically a puddle. Okay, let's address the elephant in the cave, the question everyone's thinking but no one wants to ask out loud at dinner parties. Were Neanderthal men anatomically different down there? I know you're curious. We all are. When two different human species are getting romantic, the first thing everyone wonders about is compatibility in the most intimate sense. The answer might disappoint those hoping for scandalous revelations. DNA analysis suggests Neanderthal males were pretty much the same size and shape as modern human males in all the relevant departments. So if you were expecting some shocking anatomical differences that would explain the reproductive challenges, sorry to burst that bubble. Physical compatibility wasn't the problem there. But there were other significant physical differences that definitely mattered when it came to successful reproduction and raising children together. Challenge. Neanderthals had notably wider pelvises than modern humans, which created some interesting complications. This wider pelvis was an Ice Age adaptation that might have made childbirth easier for Neanderthal women carrying Neanderthal babies. But what happened when a Neanderthal woman was carrying the baby of a differently built modern human father? Or when a modern human woman with her narrower pelvis was trying to give birth to a baby that had inherited some of the stockier Neanderthal build? These weren't just minor differences. We're talking about fundamentally different body architectures that had evolved separately for hundreds of thousands of years. The biomechanics of pregnancy and childbirth could have been genuinely challenging for mixed couples. Imagine being a modern human woman 50,000 years ago, pregnant with a half Neanderthal baby who's developing with broader shoulders and a different skeletal structure than your body was designed to accommodate. That's not just uncomfortable. That could be life-threatening in an era before medical intervention. The communication problem. Then there were the even more fundamental differences in head and brain structure. Neanderthals had completely different skull shapes, with pronounced brow ridges, larger brains, and possibly different vocal apparatus. Some scientists think they could speak in ways similar to modern humans. Others aren't convinced they had the same language capabilities we do. Still others think they might have communicated in ways we can't even imagine. Picture trying to have a romantic relationship when you're not even sure if your partner fully understands your attempts at conversation. Imagine trying to flirt when your pickup lines might be getting lost in translation, not just linguistically, but cognitively. How do you express love, negotiate relationship boundaries, or discuss family planning when you might be operating with fundamentally different communication systems? Love beyond words. But here's the beautiful part of this story. Somehow, attraction transcended all these barriers. Despite different body types, different brain structures, and possibly different communication abilities, these two species found ways to connect that went far beyond words. Maybe it was through gestures, the universal language of touch and expression that transcends species. Maybe it was through gifts, carefully crafted tools, or beautiful ornaments that communicated care and attention. Maybe it was through shared activities, hunting together, gathering food together, surviving harsh winters side by side. Or maybe it was just basic physical and emotional chemistry, the kind of attraction that operates on such a fundamental biological level that it doesn't need words or cultural understanding. Think about how modern humans fall in love across language barriers, cultural differences, and even personality types that seem incompatible. Apparently, that same mysterious force that draws people together was powerful enough to work across species lines 50,000 years ago. Evidence of integrated communities. The fossil record provides tantalizing hints that these relationships weren't just brief encounters. And we found evidence of what might be hybrid populations, groups with mixed Neanderthal and modern human physical traits, suggesting that in some places truly integrated communities might have existed for generations. Imagine villages where Neanderthal and modern human families live side by side, where children with mixed heritage grew up learning from both genetic lineages, where the boundaries between species became blurred through daily coexistence. These weren't just isolated romantic encounters between individuals. These might have been entire communities where interspecies relationships became normalized, where mixed families raised children together, where the genetic and cultural exchange was so thorough that distinct species boundaries started to dissolve. The physical legacy. The physical differences that once separated Neanderthals and modern humans are still visible today in the fossil record, but they're also hidden in the genetics of modern populations. The wider pelvises, the brain structure variations, the immune system differences, even subtle changes in skull shape. All of these physical adaptations left traces in modern human DNA. If you have European or Asian ancestry, you're carrying physical adaptations that were shaped by these ancient romantic encounters. Your bone density, your muscle attachment points, your brain structure, even your jaw muscles might reflect genetic innovations that came from Neanderthal lovers 50,000 years ago. The physical reality of these relationships was complex, challenging, and sometimes probably dangerous. But it was also profound enough to literally reshape human anatomy and physiology in ways that are still affecting your body today. Ready for Chapter 8? We're about to explore the most romantic and tragic theory about what happened to the Neanderthals, the possibility that they didn't die out through violence or competition, but literally loved themselves into extinction through the most epic merger in human history. Here's the plot twist that changes everything we thought we knew about human evolution. Neanderthals might not have been conquered by violence, wiped out by climate change, or outcompeted by superior technology. They might have been literally loved to death. This is the most romantic apocalypse story ever told, and it's rewriting textbooks about how species disappear from Earth. The traditional story versus the love story. For decades, scientists have focused on dramatic theories about Neanderthal extinction. Maybe climate change destroyed their ice age habitats. Maybe modern humans had better weapons and hunting strategies. Maybe disease epidemics wiped them out. Maybe there was violent competition for resources that modern humans won through superior intelligence or technology. All of these theories assume conflict, competition, and conquest. They paint a picture of Neanderthals as losers in some epic struggle for survival, defeated by stronger, smarter, more adaptable modern humans. But a growing number of scientists are proposing something radically different. The real culprit wasn't war, it was romance, the mathematical love story. Picture this incredible scenario. Around 50,000 years ago, modern humans arrive in Neanderthal territory carrying more than just tools and technology. They bring larger social groups, extensive trade networks, and fundamentally different approaches to community and relationships. Instead of immediately fighting for territory, something unexpected happens. These two human species start forming relationships. But here's where the mathematics of love becomes the mathematics of extinction. There were approximately 10 times more modern humans than Neanderthals when these populations started mixing, 10 to 1. In any integrated population, that ratio creates an unavoidable demographic reality. Neanderthal traits will be rapidly diluted, not through violence, but through simple reproductive mathematics. Think of it like adding a few drops of red paint to a large bucket of white paint. Both colors are perfectly good, both have value, but when you mix them together, the red eventually disappears into pink, then into white, and the red doesn't get destroyed, it gets absorbed. That's exactly what might have happened to Neanderthal populations. Reproductive advantages. Modern humans brought significant reproductive advantages that had nothing to do with intelligence or technology and everything to do with social structure and demographic success. Larger social networks meant exponentially more mating opportunities. While Neanderthals lived in small, isolated groups where everyone was potentially related, modern humans traveled in larger communities with extensive trade relationships, connecting hundreds or thousands of people across vast territories. Imagine being a young Neanderthal woman whose entire dating pool consists of maybe 20 to 50 people, half of whom are your relatives. Then modern humans arrive with social networks spanning continents, bringing genetic diversity you've never seen and romantic possibilities you never imagined. Modern humans also had potentially better sperm competition success rates. Recent research suggests that in mixed populations, modern human males might have had biological advantages in fertilization that had nothing to do with attractiveness or compatibility and everything to do with reproductive biology. They maintained higher overall fertility rates and better child survival rates, possibly due to their larger genetic diversity and more robust immune systems. While Neanderthal couples struggled with the genetic consequences of inbreeding, modern human families were producing more children who survived to reproductive age. The slow-motion merger. The result was a slow-motion demographic merger that played out over thousands of years. This wasn't a sudden conquest or catastrophic extinction event. This was a gradual process where distinct Neanderthal populations were slowly absorbed into the expanding modern human population through intermarriage, integration, and demographic mathematics. Picture small Neanderthal communities where, generation by generation, more young people formed relationships with modern humans. Each mixed marriage meant that the next generation would be less distinctly Neanderthal and more integrated into the larger modern human population. Over time, purely Neanderthal communities became increasingly rare, mixed communities became the norm. Eventually, the genetic and cultural boundaries between the two species became so blurred that distinct Neanderthal identity simply dissolved into the larger human population. They didn't go extinct, they became us. Here's the mind-blowing realization. Neanderthals didn't really go extinct in the traditional sense. They became us. If you have European or Asian ancestry, you're carrying Neanderthal genes right now. Between 1 and 4% of your DNA came from these supposedly extinct relatives. In a very real sense, Neanderthals achieved a kind of biological immortality by becoming part of our genetic makeup. They're not gone, they're integrated. Their genetic innovations, their survival adaptations, their evolutionary solutions to environmental challenges are still working inside your body today. Every time your immune system fights off an infection using Neanderthal-derived genetic variants, every time your skin and hair protect you from cold weather using Neanderthal adaptations, these ancient relatives are still helping you survive. It's like they found the ultimate evolutionary strategy. Instead of competing with modern humans, they joined them. Instead of fighting for survival as a separate species, they ensured their genetic survival by becoming part of a larger, more successful human population. Betspunning for culturally nost. But while this merger might have been biologically successful, it was culturally heartbreaking. Imagine being part of a small, traditional Neanderthal community and watching your unique way of life gradually disappear as the younger generations increasingly partner with newcomers from a more dominant culture. Picture elderly Neanderthals watching their grandchildren grow up speaking different languages, practicing different customs, identifying more with modern human culture than with traditional Neanderthal ways of life. Imagine the last fluent speakers of Neanderthal languages, the last practitioners of Neanderthal rituals, the last keepers of hundreds of thousands of years of cultural knowledge. This wasn't violent cultural destruction, this was voluntary cultural assimilation driven by a love, attraction, and the practical advantages of joining larger, more connected communities. But the end result was the same: the extinction of distinct Neanderthal culture and identity. The last pure Neanderthal populations probably didn't die in battles or from starvation. They probably watched their unique traditions, languages, and ways of life vanish through intermarriage, demographic change, and the simple appeal of joining more prosperous, well-connected modern human communities. The most romantic apocalypse. It's possibly the most romantic apocalypse in evolutionary history. Neanderthals literally loved themselves into extinction and into us. This theory suggests that love, attraction, and voluntary integration were more powerful forces in human evolution than violence, competition, and conquest. It paints a picture of our ancestors as people who chose cooperation over conflict, romance over warfare, merger over domination. It also suggests that extinction doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes extinction means transformation, sometimes dying as one thing means being reborn as something else. Neanderthals might have disappeared as a distinct species, but they achieved something remarkable. They became a permanent part of humanity's genetic and evolutionary future. The modern parallel. This story has profound implications for how we think about cultural change, demographic shifts, and identity in the modern world. Small communities are still being absorbed into larger populations through intermarriage and voluntary integration. Traditional cultures are still disappearing through love, attraction, and the practical advantages of joining more dominant societies. The Neanderthal story suggests that this process isn't necessarily tragic, even when it results in the loss of distinct cultural identities. Sometimes merger creates something new and valuable that couldn't have existed without the contribution of both original groups. But understanding this process doesn't make it less poignant. The last pure Neanderthals lived through something that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. They participated in the creation of modern humanity while watching their own distinct identity disappear forever. Ready for Chapter 9? We're about to explore how artificial intelligence and cutting-edge genetic analysis are revealing intimate details about these ancient relationships that would have been impossible to discover just a few years ago, and what new secrets about prehistoric romance scientists are uncovering every month. So how do we know all these intimate details about relationships that happened 50,000 years ago? How can scientists tell us exactly when our ancestors had romantic encounters, how often they succeeded in having children, and even which gender combinations were most likely to produce fertile offspring? The answer sounds like science fiction. Artificial intelligence and machine learning have become the ultimate genetic detectives, solving cold cases that are literally older than civilization. From the guesswork to genetic time travel. Just a decade ago, traditional genetic analysis could only tell us the most basic facts. Yes, interbreeding happened between Neanderthals and modern humans. We knew there was some mixing, but the details were fuzzy, the timing was uncertain, and the personal stories were completely invisible. But AI changed everything. Machine learning can do something absolutely revolutionary that human scientists never could. It can track specific gene segments through time like a genetic GPS system, identify exactly when they entered our genome, and even estimate how often genetic exchange occurred between different populations. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about algorithms that can look at your DNA today and trace individual genes back 50,000 years, identifying not just that your ancestors had Neanderthal lovers, but approximately when those relationships happened and how successful they were. The genetic time machine. Scientists fed massive genetic databases containing information from thousands of people into machine learning algorithms that can identify Neanderthal DNA segments in modern humans with incredible precision. These AI systems can track individual genes across thousands of genomes and even predict which ones came from which ancient populations. It's literally like having a time machine that can see into bedrooms from 50,000 years ago. The AI can tell us not just that romance happened, but when it happened, how often it happened, and what the biological consequences were for the children. The algorithms can distinguish between DNA that came from different waves of interbreeding, identify which Neanderthal populations contributed, which genes, and even estimate the success rates of different types of relationships. So upon the December 2024 breakthrough, those groundbreaking studies from December 2024 that pinpointed the exact timing of major interbreeding events, those represented a quantum leap in our understanding, and they were only possible because of artificial intelligence. These studies used AI to analyze over 300 ancient and modern genomes simultaneously, comparing genetic patterns across tens of thousands of years and multiple continents. No human scientist could possibly process that amount of information or identify the subtle patterns that reveal the timing and frequency of ancient romantic encounters. The machine learning algorithms can detect genetic signatures that are invisible to traditional analysis, identifying traces of ancient relationships that are so faint they would be lost in the noise of normal genetic variation. And technology meets ancient romance. We're literally using the most advanced technology in human history to understand our most ancient love stories. The same artificial intelligence techniques that power modern social media, medical diagnostics, and space exploration are now revealing intimate details about prehistoric relationships. The irony is beautiful. We're using algorithms that can process millions of data points per second to understand the deeply personal emotional connections between individual people who lived before writing, before agriculture, before any recorded history. The accelerating discovery. And the discoveries are accelerating at an incredible pace. Every month, AI reveals new details about these prehistoric relationships. Scientists are using machine learning to estimate ancient population sizes, track migration routes, identify beneficial and harmful genetic exchanges, and even predict which ancient relationships were most likely to produce surviving children. Recent AI analysis has revealed that the success rate of Neanderthal modern human relationships was much lower than anyone expected. Machine learning algorithms detected patterns suggesting that only certain gender combinations could produce fertile offspring. AI has even identified specific genes that improve survival rates and others that created health problems that persist today. The future of genetic archaeology. The most exciting part? We're still in the early stages of this technological revolution. As AI becomes more sophisticated and genetic databases become larger, we'll be able to answer even more intimate questions about our ancestors. Future machine learning algorithms might be able to tell us about the social structures of ancient communities, the migration patterns of individual families, even the personal choices that shaped human evolution. Who knows what intimate details about our ancestors we'll discover next? Maybe AI will reveal information about ancient languages, cultural practices, or individual personality traits that influenced mate selection 50,000 years ago. We might even discover evidence of other human species that we haven't found yet, or identify genetic contributions from populations that have left no fossil record but whose DNA signatures are still hidden in modern genomes. Ready for the final chapter? We're about to explore what this incredible 200,000-year love story means for your life today, and why understanding our romantic past might be the key to understanding our genetic future. So what does this incredible 200,000-year love story mean for your life right now? Why should you care about romantic encounters that happened before writing, before agriculture, before anything we recognize as civilization? The answer is both profound and personal. This ancient romance is still actively shaping who you are today. You are a living love letter. First, if you have non-African ancestry, you're literally a walking product of interspecies romance. Every day, genetic innovations from extinct human lovers are working inside your body. your immune system fighting off infections, your skin protecting you from UV radiation, your hair insulating you from cold. Even your sleep patterns and personality traits are partially shaped by genetic exchanges that happened 50,000 years before recorded history. You're not just learning about ancient history, you're learning about yourself. Those Neanderthal genes aren't museum pieces, they're active parts of your biology that influence everything from your disease susceptibility to your response to medications. When you get a blood test that shows how your body processes certain drugs, when you discover you're at higher risk for specific diseases, when you notice you're naturally a morning person or night owl, you are seeing the ongoing influence of prehistoric romance on your modern life. We are all genetic hybrids. Second, this story completely changes how we think about human evolution and identity. We're not the pure product of a single evolutionary line developing in isolation. We're genetic hybrids, carrying the combined survival wisdom of multiple human species who found ways to love across the species barrier. This challenges every simple story about human origins and suggests that our success as a species came not from being the best or most evolved humans, but from being the most willing to integrate genetic innovations from other human populations. Your DNA is a library containing survival strategies developed across multiple continents and hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. You're carrying genetic solutions to environmental challenges that your ancestors never personally faced, but that other human species spent millennia perfecting. Cooperation over competition. Third, this research suggests that cooperation and integration, not just competition and conflict, have been major forces in human evolution. Our ancestors succeeded not by destroying other human species, but by incorporating their strengths through romance, integration, and genetic merger. This has profound implications for how we think about cultural diversity, immigration, and genetic mixing in the modern world. The Neanderthal story suggests that genetic and cultural exchange between different populations has been a source of strength, not weakness, throughout human history. The most successful human populations have consistently been those that remained open to genetic and cultural exchange with other groups, not those that isolated themselves. The warning about genetic diversity. But there's also an important warning embedded in this love story. The genetic burden we inherited from inbred Neanderthal populations reminds us why genetic diversity matters for long-term survival. Small, isolated populations accumulate harmful mutations. Large, diverse populations are more resilient to disease, environmental change, and genetic disorders. The Neanderthal experience shows us what happens when populations become too small and too isolated. Genetic health deteriorates, fertility drops, and long-term survival becomes impossible. This lesson is relevant for modern conservation biology, for understanding the challenges facing isolated human populations, and for appreciating why genetic diversity has been crucial to human success. Living through a golden age of discovery. Finally, this research highlights how artificial intelligence and genetic analysis are revolutionizing our understanding of human history at an unprecedented pace. We're living through a golden age of discovery about our own origins, and the pace of revelation is accelerating. In just the past few years, we've learned more about ancient human relationships than in the previous century of archaeological research. Machine learning algorithms are revealing intimate details about prehistoric life that would have been impossible to discover through traditional methods. The stories we're uncovering are more complex, more romantic, and more personally relevant than anyone imagined. Our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were loving, choosing, integrating, and creating the genetic foundation for modern humanity through deeply personal relationships. Taking pride in your Neanderthal heritage. The next time someone calls you a Neanderthal, maybe take it as a compliment. You're carrying the DNA of ultimate survivors who endured ice ages that would have killed most living things, developed sophisticated technologies without any modern tools, and loved deeply enough to ensure their genes live on in billions of people today. You're the product of the most successful long-distance relationship in evolutionary history, a 200,000-year romance that literally rewrote what it means to be human. Your Neanderthal heritage represents resilience, adaptation, innovation, and the power of love to transcend even species boundaries. That's not an insult, that's an incredible genetic legacy. Ready for our final chapter? We're about to wrap up this epic love story with some thoughts about what these ancient romances teach us about love, identity, and what it truly means to be human in the 21st century. The story of Neanderthals isn't really about extinction at all. When you strip away all the scientific jargon and genetic analysis, this is actually the most successful long-distance relationship in the history of life on Earth. Think about what we've just discovered together. Across 200,000 years, three major waves of romance, countless individual love stories, and the ultimate merger of two human species. This ancient relationship literally rewrote what it means to be human. Most relationships don't last 200,000 days, let alone 200,000 years. Most love stories don't survive across continents and ice ages. Most romantic connections don't literally change the genetic makeup of entire species. But this one did. West, the living legacy of love. Neanderthal DNA lives on in billions of people walking around today. Their genetic innovations are still helping us fight diseases, adapt to different climates, and survive in environments our African ancestors never imagined. Their survival adaptations are still helping us thrive in diverse conditions across the globe. Every time your immune system successfully fights off an infection using Neanderthal-derived genetic variants, every time your skin and hair protect you in harsh weather using ancient adaptations, every time you benefit from genetic diversity that came from interspecies romance, these extinct lovers are still taking care of you 50,000 years later. They achieved something that most people only dream of: true immortality through love, not the metaphorical kind that poets write about, but literal genetic immortality that ensures their biological legacy will continue as long as humanity exists. Their hufulke of being human. And their love stories, well, those gave us the mixed blessing of being wonderfully, chaotically, beautifully human. The genetic gifts that help us survive, the medical vulnerabilities that challenge us, the complex immune systems that sometimes protect us and sometimes attack us, all of this comes from the beautiful mess of interspecies romance. We're not the clean, simple product of linear evolution. We're the gloriously complicated result of multiple human species who couldn't resist falling in love with each other despite hundreds of thousands of years of separate development. The love story that created you. So the next time you feel the urge to blame your ancestors for something, whether it's your genetic health risks, your personality quirks, or your complicated family dynamics, remember this. They spent 200,000 years having one of the most complicated relationships in evolutionary history and somehow, against all biological odds, made it work well enough to create you. They navigated species barriers, language differences, cultural conflicts, and reproductive challenges that would make modern relationship counselors throw up their hands in despair. They loved across ice ages, continental migrations, and demographic changes that would have destroyed most communities. That's not just evolution, that's not just survival, that's love on an epic scale that spans geological time. Thank you for this journey. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through deep time and deeper romance. We've traveled from the molecular level of DNA analysis to the sweeping scope of species evolution and discovered that the most important forces shaping human history were often the most intimate ones. If this story has changed how you think about human evolution, genetics, or the power of love to transcend every barrier, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. There are so many more incredible stories hidden in our DNA, and I can't wait to explore them with you. If you want to discover what percentage of your DNA comes from these ancient love affairs, there are DNA testing services that can tell you exactly how much Neanderthal heritage you're carrying. You can literally quantify how much of your genetic makeup comes from prehistoric romance. But whether you have 1% Neanderthal DNA or 4%, whether your ancestors participated in the first wave of interbreeding or the last, the message is the same. You exist because love found a way to transcend every barrier that biology and time could create. And remember the fundamental truth we've discovered together. History isn't just more intimate than you think. It's more intimate than you can think. What other secrets are hidden in our genes? What other love stories are waiting to be discovered? What other incredible connections between ancient romance and modern life are scientists uncovering right now? Subscribe to find out, because the story of human love is far from over, and the next chapter might be even more surprising than the last. Until next time, remember, you're not just the product of evolution, you're the product of love that conquered time itself.